There's been a bit of a shake-up at the IRS. The current head of the agency, Melanie Krause, has stepped down, per the Washington Post. The reason? She's protesting a new move from President Trump's administration.
The Department of Homeland Security and the IRS signed a memorandum of understanding Tuesday. In it, the two agencies agreed to share information for immigration enforcement. Specifically, the IRS can now share information about illegal migrants who are under criminal investigation or face deportation orders. Fox News first reported the deal.
The DHS wrote in a statement, under President Trump's leadership, the government is finally doing what it should have all along, sharing information across the federal government to solve problems. Biden not only allowed millions of illegal aliens to flood into our country, he lost them due to incompetence and improper processing.
Meanwhile, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is criticizing the move. They wrote, in part, in a statement, "The Internal Revenue Code, IRC, explicitly safeguards taxpayer privacy, regardless of immigration status. Under 26 U.S.C. 6103, tax returns and taxpayer information are strictly confidential and can only be disclosed under narrow exceptions that do not include immigration enforcement. If taxpayers fear that filing a return could lead to immigration enforcement, they may be discouraged from complying, reducing overall tax revenue and harming tax administration for all Americans."
Senior legal correspondent for The Federalist, Margot Cleveland, wrote on X that this is in another stage in Trump's deportation process, which started with violent criminals. She writes, quote, "This process is the explanation to those screaming, 'You can't deport 6 million people,' or whatever. And along the way, Trump is making clear to the category of those who entered illegally, leave now or you won't get back in, which will reduce the need to deport."
Meanwhile, Senator Jackie Rosen wrote, "This is deeply shameful and breaks a promise that information immigrants provided the IRS to pay their taxes would not be used for deportations. The U.S. Senate must hold immediate hearings with Treasury and DHS leadership to get direct answers and hold them accountable."
What do you think about this, Marianne? Look, I'll tell you what I think. First of all, I hate paying taxes. It's tax season. Tax day is rapidly approaching. I hate it. If I wasn't a libertarian, doing my taxes would have certainly turned me into one.
Nobody loves it. We do it because we're supporting our country.
Sorry, I just became violently ill. Anyway, so while I might, I just don't love the process of being taxed.
Nobody loves it.
On the other hand, shouldn't the government have to share? Shouldn't government agencies share information
Robby.
with each
Thank
other?
You. Thank you for. Oh, I thought you were going to say the opposite. No,
you're withdrawing your
thing.
thing.
The opposite.
Shouldn't they not share information?
You know, we're creating a culture of fear in this country. There are certain things that we thought we could depend on, and one had to do with the IRS.
That if you're an illegal immigrant criminal, you get to stay in the U.S.
You know, when we use this term illegal immigrant, first of all, the whole country was on for getting rid of the violent criminals. Mexican gangs, the Venezuelan gangs, fine. Nobody had a problem with that, actually. But then you're moving, every time you move, oh, it's these. First of all, immigrants in this country, including undocumented immigrants, well, really that's the conversation here, undocumented immigrants, pay over $90 billion a year in taxes in the United States. Now, when it comes to the idea that some people are undocumented because of our immigration laws, making it so difficult for people. You know, we're going to have to get to root cause analysis here when it comes to immigration. First of all, much of U.S. foreign policy over the last 50 years has actually exacerbated the problem of poverty and economic instability in the United States, in Latin America. When JFK was president, he had something called an Alliance for Progress. He was basically going to do a kind of Marshall Plan for Latin America. When Lyndon Johnson became president, he scrapped all that, and he began a phase which has been a very dark, deleterious and basically imperialistic economically phase by which we've used Latin America to actually support American corporate interests more than not. This has created a lot of the danger. Also, our drug war has created a lot of the danger. Good, I'm glad you do. So we have to ask ourselves, what part have we played and what changes do we need to make that actually continue to create the situation where so many people are trying to get in here?
I support
also, both parties failed to create the kind of immigration infrastructure at the borders which would solve this problem. And let's not forget, the $8 billion plan, bipartisan, first written by Republicans, was in place, would have made a real difference. And it was Trump who came in, told Republican leaders, don't vote for it because it will work and it will give Biden a campaign win. And we
Trump
don't
was
want
right.
that.
We didn't do
So
it, and
blame
the
Congress.
border crossings went down anyway.
Pardon?
Trump was right. We didn't need it. We just needed a change in attitude, I guess, because Trump coming in reversed the border crossing trend without greater enforcement or money being spent on it. They just knew that Trump means business. But I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Marianne. I support legal immigration. I believe Congress should act to reform the immigration system to make it easier for people to come here legally, work here, pay taxes, live above board.
Good.
And we can, and if it's easier to come here legally, we won't have people, flooding across the border in unsafe conditions for them and contributing to kind of an instability on the border. That's not ideal. Want them to come here, work, contribute, be taxed, and that is all fine. And then we can vet people. If they're coming legally, we can find out if they have a criminal gang association, and then no thank you. Then we turn them away, or worse. They can't come here. That's my policy. I'm all for doing that.
But now we have millions of people who were not treated that way, who found themselves in situations. Listen, people who've gamed the system, whether they are natively born here or somewhere else, people should be held accountable. Mm-hmm. But many of the undocumented people in the United States today have been caught in a system where they could not abide by the system as it was. So we have a responsibility in this. And the idea that we are so callously just willing to throw people away, throw people out, as we talked about yesterday, there's a moral issue here. And you know what the ultimate spiritual, moral, theological question is? Does one life matter? And we're beginning to act as though we no longer believe that. And that is an undercutting of Western liberalism, and it's very, very disturbing to me.
I don't think that is the most persuasive way to sell the immigration policy we're talking about. I don't like the idea of telling people you have unearned obligations to others, or that you have some responsibility because the government's policies toward Latin America were very bad decades ago. I would say,
No.
I'm just saying this is how I sell I say it is beneficial to our nation, to our economy to grow, for goods and services to be provided, for houses to be built, for all of that, to have a labor supply, for people to come in and contribute meaningfully to the health and the growth of our country and to pay into our system. And that is good, and that is the way it's always been. My ancestors were immigrants, your ancestors were immigrants, or I don't know exactly when your ancestors came over. Mine were Italian and German immigrants who came over in the Italians in the early 1900s, and they were spat upon by everyone when they got here, and they assimilated over time, and that's just how it works. And we should keep going with that. I agree on that because it's best for the country. So I don't like to say it in terms of you have some moral obligation to it. No, it's in your own calculated, narrow self-interest for this country to be great, to have an immigration policy that generally lets people come in and work here and live here and pay taxes.
Well, it's interesting what you just said, because I actually agree with your economic analysis. Like I said, it's George W. Bush. I actually agree with that. But it's interesting that you feel or it's just interesting to me that we have become so far away from larger moral considerations. We fought the Civil War on Lincoln's absolute insistence that all men are created equal must be our moral guidance system. So the idea that speaking to the deeper moral issues that to me are at the core of the founding of our country, not religious, we're not talking about religious doctrine, we're talking about what makes a human being good. I think that if a human being is to ask ourselves, what is the right thing to do, then we should ask that question, what is good? That question should inform our consideration about public policy as well. Those two things together actually would be, in my mind, the winning way to go. Because ultimately, doing the right thing is better economics, because doing the right thing means doing the right thing by people. And when people thrive, they are more creative and more productive, and that ultimately creates greater abundance economically as well as every other way.
We're largely saying the same thing. We should, it's like the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated, and don't aggress against other people. Don't coerce other people. Let other people live. I leave people alone to
That's
prosper
not the golden
and
rule.
flourish.
That's not the golden rule. The golden rule is do unto others
as you would like to be
you would
treated.
wish.
Yes.
No, you just which is not a morally neutral argument. The golden rule is not morally neutral. What you just said is
for leaving people
neutrality,
alone.
and that is what has happened. That is what has done so much damage to the United States.
Well, now we
that
disagree
over the
again.
last few years we've bought into this myth of neutrality. Too many people. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just doing, what creates profit
First,
for my
do
country,
no harm.
For my company, as though ethical consideration. And you see it with these politicians too. I'm just trying to win. I'm just trying to get reelected. I'm just trying to create profit. No, we have to also ask what is the right thing to do.
Well, but if they're
are we being a good nation? We can't be a great country.
Right. My ethics
Not
would
a
say
good
if they're aggressing against others in the course of that, then it is in violation of my ethics.
Good.
So,
Well, I would
but it's
assume so.
the part of aggression that.
But
is
sometimes
what-
doing nothing, sometimes taking this, hey, I'm just morally neutral, which is really what's happening in this conversation that you and I have been having for a couple of days about Venezuelans who were deported, who we now know had no criminal record, such as the makeup artists and so forth. Like, hey, I believe that once you start saying, hey, about any person, then it's a slippery slope.
The other guy did have not the makeup art or
we're
the
right,
hair
that's a
guy or
gray
whatever,
area.
but the other person.
Listen, there are gray areas. There are a lot of these things that have been happening now, including some of the people have been picked up around the issue of Hamas, or we don't know Hamas.
I have strongly
But then
condemned the
then
deportation
you
of
have to work it out
students
in
for
court. You have due
criticizing.
process, and we have to find out. You can't just get rid of them because this person's opinion is this or that. That's not the way a nation run by laws works. And the last person, you should be the deciding factor is the president, who we know changes every other minute depending on what he feels is best for him.
Up next, we will discuss the battle between Congress and the president over these tariffs with Semaphore reporter Burgess Everett. More Rising right after this.